morning, buenos dias. Welcome once again to Tiempo. I'm Joe Torres. We've got two topics this morning, including an important call for volunteers to help mentor and coach young boys and girls in our neighborhood. That's so important. We'll talk about the special need for Latino mentors in New York City in just a moment. We want to begin, though, with a push for the history books. We've talked about this before here on Tiempo. It's now several years in the making, the effort to bring about the first National Museum dedicated to the culture and history of Latinos in America. Those efforts are moving forward, but there is still some work to be done. And here to update us on where things stand, our good friend, Sid Wilson, the newly named board chairman of the group working to bring this museum to life. ¿Cómo estamos?
Muy bien, Happy New Year.
Yeah, no, right? Still full from all
very great. Still full from all that
holiday food, right?
Yes.
Habichuelas y todo.
Yeah.
What is it, 18 months since we had you here last to talk about this effort, which is now several years in the making.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's great to be back. And last time I was here was when we had completed the report by the Commission to study the potential creation of a National Museum of the American Latino.
Right.
Since then, it's been submitted to the President, to Congress, and in the Senate, it was introduced as a bill in the Senate by Senator Menendez and Senator Harry Reid and Senator Marco Rubio.
Okay, bueno.
But now that we're in a new Congress, the 113th Congress, our mission now is to get the bill reintroduced and passed in this Congress to move forward.
Okay. So the Senate never actually voted on it in the 112th
It was never voted on. That's correct.
We'll talk about that in a second. I want to talk about your role now because the Commission's work is done, correct?
That's correct.
The Commission's job was to come up with the presentation, present it to Congress. That's been done. Muchas gracias. We move on. Now you are part of an organization called Friends.
That's
your
correct.
role is what? Lobbying, I guess, the new Congress?
Our role is to advocate for the passage of a bill that would authorize the Smithsonian to have a new museum on the National Mall.
Yes.
And so the role, my role as the new board chairman of the Friends of the American Latino Museum is to work with our fellow board members and also with the mission of getting Congress to vote yes on the creation of a bill that would authorize it.
To advocate, to push.
That's correct.
Okay, I mean to be knocking on doors, correct?
Absolutely. So that it does mean walking the halls of Congress. It means going to the Senate, to the House, and urging all of our supporters to ask the members of Congress to support it and to vote yes on a bill.
Now, not to confuse people, but just to be sure they understand, Friends, the organization, has been around for a while, correct?
Yes.
In fact, it preceded the Commission.
That is correct. The Friends of the American Latino Museum actually was created at first to get Congress to pass a bill to create the Commission.
Yes.
That was done in 2008.
Right.
Where it was passed by Congress, signed by President George W. Bush, and then at that point the Commission to study the creation of the museum was created, at which point President Barack Obama had appointed me as part of that commission. Once that was done in 2011, the work of the Commission was completed.
Yes.
So now there's a recommendation that's before Congress on what would be needed to create a new National Museum of the American Latino, and now the role of the Friends Group is to help advocate and push for the passage of a bill using those recommendations by the Commission.
I think we've cleared it up. Now, with you as chairman, whenever I see there's a new chairman or there's a change in the leadership, it seems to suggest to me that perhaps the old leadership was getting stale. Perhaps the old leadership was laying down on the job a little bit. Is that the situation here?
Not at all, actually. Our past chairman, Jonathan Yorba, he was there. He served his term, so he had completed his term. At which point it was time to
simply time for a change.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
but change usually means, with Sid Wilson, new ideas, new passion, new invigoration, if you will. What is it that, now that you're the chairman, the big dog, that you would like to see the Friends Board doing that perhaps they weren't doing so much before, or do it differently? Go ahead.
Well, I think that one of the great things about the organization is that we have a very broad-based group of members and over 100,000 followers in social media. That's actually more than most Smithsonian institutions. And so one of my roles, certainly living in New Jersey and being very close to Washington, D.C., I'm just a very short train ride from Capitol Hill.
Yes.
So it allows me to go to Washington at a much more frequent basis, and certainly working with our supporters and our board members, I believe that we'll be able to put a very strong push for this bill.
And is a part of that push social media? I mean, that's the way of the world these days.
It certainly is. These days, social media plays a pivotal role.
Giant.
We have over 100,000 followers on Facebook. We have tens of thousands of followers on Twitter. And whenever we put out a message, it gets out there for, to virtually, and it really broadens out once people forward. So
I envision Sid Wilson at a board meeting with the leadership around the table, and you're saying, you guys, we got to tweet. Individually as well as an organization to push to make sure that the topic is at the forefront of people's minds at all times.
Absolutely, and we have a great team of supporters, and of course our friends of the Raven Group, who have really given us incredible support in making sure that we're going the right direction. And I think that when you combine that with all of our many other organization supporters, many of NCLR, LULAC, NALEO, all these other Hispanic Federation that are really working with us on this, I think you're going to see a really concerted, really organized effort to make this happen.
We've got about a minute before we go to our commercial break, and we'll come back and talk about what still needs to be done. But I wanted to show the schematic that I think you provided to us that shows, I guess, the front of the House of Representatives and where the museum will go. There it is on the screen there. In terms of the reflecting pool, because that's what most people is a landmark for them. The blue dot on the top left, that will be the site?
Actually, yes, it's because right over there,
on the top left.
Because that's right over there is where the Arts and Industries building is.
Yes.
And so that's the site that Congress wants to authorize for us to use as the location for the National Museum of American Latino for the new Smithsonian.
That's prime real estate right there.
It's prime real estate. It's on the National Mall, and it's what the community asked for. When we went on tour, 90% of community members say we would rather take longer to help build a museum, but have it on the National Mall versus do a shorter period off the mall.
To be the right site. All right. When we come back, sit tight. More on the future Smithsonian American Latino Museum. It's going to happen, and what still needs to happen to make it a reality. There's still a few hurdles to jump over. We'll talk about those with Sid Wilson when we come right back. Welcome back to Tiempo. It's been a long time coming, but now the first ever National Museum devoted to Latino culture and history is nearly a reality. Joining us once again is the chairman of the board of the Friends of the National Museum of the American Latino, Sid Wilson. You laid a lot of foundation with the previous Congress.
Yes.
January 3rd, we got a new Congress.
That's correct.
Does that mean you're back to square zero in terms of convincing legislators that this is something we need to get on the table and voted for?
The answer is that given that we are now in a new Congress, the 113th Congress, it does mean that we have to get the bill reintroduced in this Congress. And so part of our role will be to make sure that the bill does get reintroduced with the ultimate mission of getting the bill voted on and passed.
Okay. I'm going to throw out a few things that might get in the way. Fiscal cliff, economy, picket, immigration reform, health care. Big issues that in terms of the American priority might come ahead of getting a new museum dedicated to Latinos. How much does that get in the way of you getting their attention? When you knock on their door, do they say, come talk to me later, I can't focus on that right now?
Well, the answer is that there are many ways that we can get the bill passed. The bill could be potentially attached as part of a larger bill.
Okay.
This bill has no appropriations to it. What this bill does is create and authorize the Smithsonian to designate the Arts and Industries building to do that. So I think that when you look at the correlation, that making sure that we recognize our Latino culture goes towards strengthening our education system. I think that would certainly go in terms of the priorities of our Congress.
Okay, so you can attach it to an immigration reform, to to something that might come up sooner?
You know, it's certainly possible. I mean, you know, I'm certainly not the expert in terms of how they would make that happen with Congress. You know, it could happen as a standalone bill, but it is possible that if there is a education-related bill or there's a museum-related bill with the Smithsonian, that this could be considered as part of that legislation.
You mentioned it quickly, but I want to reiterate it. No appropriation, no taxpayer dollars at this point right now.
At this point right now, there's no taxpayer dollars, so that's why I think that this will get very broad bipartisan support. Because this is simply saying we want to authorize the creation of museums so we can start the fundraising on the private side with no taxpayer dollars.
And in light of the fact that the president is on board with this project, and the way Latinos are growing and voting, as we just saw in this recent election, you don't have any doubt. I mean, this should pass without any problem, correct?
I do. I honestly have a great level of confidence that if that Congress, if the House and the Senate were given a chance to vote up or down, that we would get this vote passed. Because this is about recognizing the 500-year history of Latinos in the United States.
I'm going to move us forward and assume that it passes, okay? The next step after that, you don't have an architect just yet, correct?
No, not yet.
Okay. So after it passes, what happens next to keep the ball rolling?
After that happens, then at that point, the Smithsonian Institution would be tasked to start the process of building the museum, or at least constructing the museum. That means creating an advisory board. That means finding the architects. That means looking at potential curators. That means looking at collections and seeing what kind of collections we would do. And then at that, all these things that will take place. And then, of course, there's a fundraising, because, of course, we would have to raise the first half of the museum dollars before we can go back to Congress in years to come.
You say artifacts. In the dream of Sid Wilson, what are some of the things that you hope to see inside the museum?
I would love to see a very broad-based history of what we've been doing over the last 500 years. Latinos, whether it's in the military, whether it's through inventions, whether it's in business, or whether it's civil rights advocacy. So many different areas where Latinos have contributed to the fabric of America, because our history is the American story.
Do you see not just artifacts, but tributes to people? Roberto Clemente, Desi Arnaz, Sonia Sotomayor, etc.
You know, all of them, as well as many Latinos that served in the Civil War, that served in the American Revolution. I mean, going back so many years, and of course, many of our modern heroes as well.
Last question. We got 30 seconds left. All goes perfectly well. The new museum, doors open, roughly when? If you had your dreams come true.
If you assumed a perfect scenario, you would assume that this museum is probably about 10 to 12 years away. Because you have to raise the funds, you have to go through the whole process, and then reconstruct and then make that happen.
Which means Sid Wilson will be on Tiempo a few more times.
A few more times. Many more years to come. Absolutely.
Looking forward to it. My friend, thank you very much for the update. Such an important issue there. Keep us posted, please.
Thank you so much.
Coming up next on Tiempo, lending a helping hand to our city's boys and girls. How you can get involved with mentoring the next generation of New Yorkers.